bring a wide range of law enforcement leaders to Los Angeles and to hear from them on what they're doing, and especially around less lethal. That particular symposium was a less lethal symposium, and looking at what other options we have. I think there's kind of, within our core values is quality through continuous improvement, and we will continue to pull on that. And thank you to the also the Inspector General. The reports that they've shared and the things that they've given back to us have helped us to continually shape. We're trying to not wait until you get the report, but as soon as we hear something or get feedback, we are weaving that into our response within training.
Commissioner, any questions? Chief Decker.
Just briefly, first of all, thank you very much for that detailed presentation today, and thank you for the report. I continued not just reading it, but looking at other cities, and I have to note yet again that I have not found any other police department that provides as much detail and as much data on use of force, and particularly in the short amount of time that this has been released for 2018. I realize an impressive amount of work has gone into this, so I do want to thank the department and everyone who helped compile this. Secondly, I'd like to thank you for today's presentations. I know last week we threw a lot of questions at you, some of which involve getting information from other cities and other departments, which is not within your control, as you noted. But I do thank you for the information we're able to attain, and for what you've been able to share thus far today. It's very helpful. And finally, I just want to note that my questions today all revolved around where we go from here. And your presentation today answered my questions in terms of what are our next steps, how do we improve further based upon the information that's been provided in this report. So I thank you for that detailed presentation. It certainly helped me in understanding our pathway forward. I do acknowledge that the report highlights much progress has been made, but this is a department that always wants to improve, and I wanted to hear more about the pathway forward. So thank you both for doing that today. I appreciate it.
Commissioner Barner.
Thank you. First, by the way, just one factual question about the data in the report. At the last meeting and during the public comment period, there was a question about whether the data included uses of force that may have occurred in the jail, in the jails. Do you know the answer to that question?
Sir, any use of force by department personnel would be involved in this report. They all get captured in the same database for teams.
Were any of the incidents that were reported here, then I may have missed this, and forgive me if that's the case, but were any of the incidences reported in this past year an incident that occurred in the jail?
You're asking about specific uses of force that occurred in the jails?
Yes, Commissioner, we can give you the exact by command reportable use of force. The department had one reportable use of force standard that every employee is subject to. In each instance of it being used, there's an investigation that is standardized as well. It is in the jail setting, the difference is should there be an in-custody death, and there's an additional set of protocols. I don't know that we have a breakdown today by command, but we certainly, Critical Incident Review Division has and others, and on the profiles and the ComStat profile, they'll have that number.
Sure. Thank you. And the next, I think that question or the follow-up on that, and probably the next two are things that, in my view, you can, I would ask that you maybe plan to some further follow-up with the subcommittee, the Use Force Subcommittee, by way of information. And so going back to the first comment on the mechanisms in place to measure the impact of training and so on, you made the point, I think, which is well taken, that it requires a longer-term look. I think I fully captured, with specificity about, the how part of that in terms of exactly how some of that impact is measured. And again, if you have a comment now, it's fine, but if not, I just ask that it be something that we walk through in a little more detail with the subcommittee at the appropriate time.
I can say that we have several partnerships that we move forward with. I work with a professional advisory committee of members of kind of the academic world, and we kind of leverage their resources to ask them sometimes to do literature reviews or to help us with assessments and evaluations. We have another effort that is in conjunction with Mr. Alakon's office, looking at an assessment for this upcoming use of command and control course. As we get more definition around that, but it's going to go through a stringent academic process as well. And so what I have seen in the last 14 years as director of is that our department has become more and more receptive to what kind of research we can do. And I think there was a time in law enforcement where that was kind of held at bay or not engaged in the same way. And I'm really both encouraged and excited to see where we can go as we look and leverage those resources to help us get better.
That's just a starting
and so I think this will be a good topic of discussion
for
at
total
future
criminal
subcommittee to just appreciate that in a little more detail. So I appreciate that. On the, you mentioned there was a lot of discussion of the de-escalation policy, and I think you mentioned that this report itself is looked at as a training needs assessment tool, and so I appreciate that. One question is, you mentioned also that the de-escalation is trained on, talked about at every level of command, from officer on up. Does it start in the academy? I mean, is it part of the curriculum there? Can you comment on that?
Absolutely. Again, it helps when our source documents are all consistent because we use those all the way from the very first officer coming in. Our reserves would get that training. We have that even in our cadet training. So we utilize that as a framework throughout every aspect of the department.
Okay. And in terms of the current your report and de-escalation, do we know if there were, with regard to those incidences where there was a use of force, do we know in those instances whether there was de-escalation that was attempted or applied and maybe was unsuccessful?
I'm not exactly sure about every case that was used here, although I will say that we are looking at body camera footage, and what we have started implementing in 2019 is that we take body camera footage and we'll use that for our roll call training to highlight, here's what good de-escalation looks like, and here's how these officers actually implemented and used it. So we're trying to exponentially help the conversation be present all the time, but also that we put it in front of officers. This is what it looks like when it's done cohesively and well. I will say that after those shootings, however, they do go through that general training update, and they will have de-escalation as a mandatory topic that is reviewed with some of our experts.
So let me go back and link to that question relative to each non-categorical use of force as well as the categorical use of force. Is de-escalation, the concept of de-escalation evaluated as to the officer's use of force? I think that's good.
No, what I'm asking is, and we look now at the data that's incorporated in the report that we're prepared to review today, do we know, when we look at that set of incidences that involve use of force, do we know how many of those, for example, was there, we can tell in those cases was de-escalation in every case, and it just was successful in some, not in the others?
I'll refer this to critical incident. I think the volume, the sheer volume in this short period of time, and recognizing that towards the latter half of the year, many of those uses of force have not been fully adjudicated, that I don't know that that's a question we can answer at this point.
Fair enough.
But I would look to Chief Peters or Captain Thomas.
And let me also say before you comment, Chief Peters, that again, I think as hopefully you're capturing some of my questions here, it's not the expectation that there's an answer to every question readily available today. There's a lot of information in a 400-page report, which is why some of these areas that I think deserve a little more thoughtful consideration or a deeper dive. That's why I'm suggesting that they be the topic of a subcommittee, just a meeting so we can discuss further and then decide which, if any, are appropriate to bring back to the commission and public.
Absolutely, Commissioner. I'm looking forward to doing that and working with you on that piece.
Good morning, John Peters, Director of the Office of Support Services. I just wanted to comment a little bit on your question relative to the de-escalation and the consideration or the evaluation. So as the chairman of the Use of Force Board, on every categorical use of force that we review, part of the presentation that is required from the commanding officer that presents it to us at the board is to cover the elements of de-escalation that occurred or didn't occur in their analysis of the incident. Now, understanding the whole conversation of de-escalation going back to the beginning, and when we sent people back to New Orleans and worked with people all around the country to come up with the standard that started with PERF, the ICAT, the Integrating Communication and Tactics, that what de-escalation was intended to primarily deal with is not a situation when somebody pulls a gun and is shooting at an officer necessarily. That's immediate reaction to dealing with. But with the multiple incidents that we are seeing around the country with people with edged weapons, blunt instruments that were suffering from mental illness, under the influence of some narcotic or other substance, how do we better manage those situations? And so when those issues are appropriate in these categorical use of force, the captains are absolutely required to walk through that patrol acronym and to tell us in their analysis whether it applied or not. So we look at that very closely.
Looking at that further, though, to look at the data and dig into it and look for coming up with a survey, for instance, scale, to understand evidence of de-escalation or absence of thereof. I think it's a great opportunity for the department. As you said, we move quickly to get the facts out. The analysis that follows, some of it just pops right out at you. Others is more nuanced, and we look forward to working with the commissioner, with the commission subcommittee, in defining a framework that makes that achievable within a reasonable period of time, i.e. 3 to 6 months. One of the nuances about this is that we've seen since this conversation beginning in 2014, we have taken each of the steps that you've seen have been the results of what we're experiencing that year or the year before, and for instance this last year, the 2017 report showed us an increased number of officers involved, increased number of rounds. So that's where, and the impact of less than desired impact of less lethal systems. What flowed from that into 2018 and now into 2019 has been adjustments and steps. But I think that a more systematic review, perhaps even with a university partner, that could look at this over a period of time and see whether or not those adjustments that we've made are seeing a change in when we start doing scores, if you will, on individuals' uses of force. Are the evidence, and is there a correlation? Can we see that, statistically, is it something that appears to have some influence that supports the theory that there's this impact? I think helping us with that in a subcommittee setting would be helpful.
Okay, I appreciate that, because I think one of our collective goals, as Commissioner Decker commented extensively about the here and what an outlier the department is in that regard in terms of generating it. And my view that we should not look at it simply as a look back. Every year that's one valuable opportunity, but we should be looking for opportunities to use the data to influence and change things as we're going forward as well. So I'll look forward to that discussion. Just a couple others here quickly. One was also just on the point of using the report as a training needs assessment. Are there training initiatives that are either planned or underway now that are intended to further improve the statistics for the current year?
Well, I would say we continually are looking at those 58 courses where we've enhanced. One of the things I didn't mention is one of the things that we created was a instructor guidebook on de-escalation. And we actually retrained our instructors how to teach on this and how to teach it through scenarios. And so it's kind of systematically gone through. It's not that we just added a piece of paper or a new tabletop activity. We are pushing our instructors to get more and more out of our officers when they're in training, and finding that they're very engaged when they're in training, and that they're very responsive to the new training that we're putting out.
Dr. Purnell, on a corporate-wide, department-wide basis, revisit the command and control. I believe that the commissioner is asking is, going forward, what is our major element of our training in regards to efforts to reduce the use of deadly force and the overall use of force?
Precisely.
Well, I do think that the new command and control force, where we're putting people through three different kind of scenario environments, is critical because it's a coordinated effort. So if you think of the use of force update, maybe you looked a little closer at the individual officer and their partner. Now we're expanding to how do we coordinate officers when you have 3 and 4 additional units respond, and if we're asking them to incorporate other resources as a better response for de-escalation, then we can everyone has a role and is contributing to that. So I fully anticipate in that next year, as we get a better response from the command and control force, that we will see.
There's 2 other things that I'd just like to mention in terms of things that we're moving forward with. The standardized roll call training is something that we're reinstituting. This is something that we had in the past that the department's gotten away from for a number of reasons, but we're reinstituting that. And a part of that standardized roll call training that will go out to each command and each watch will be required to cover certain topics, and those topics will be de-escalation, procedural justice, some of the things that we talked about here today. The second thing is we're getting ready to launch, working with a couple of leading researchers, criminologists on use of force that are looking at officer perception to danger, essentially a threat, and they have come up with a tool and instrument and working in conjunction with our command and control scenarios, at what point the officers are perceiving threat, and then they fill out a questionnaire relative to that, and they're doing some studies to help us understand that piece a little bit better. So that will go to our continued efforts with de-escalation.
Excellent. The last thing that I would raise, and this may be, and you can first tell me what if any relationship it has to the use of force data, because it may not, but I would just put it out for something I think is worth some consideration, and that relates to what's referred to as the public contact snapshot data that's on the website. And in my view, I think we should take a look to see if it can be presented in a more user-friendly format. That would be one thing I'd ask you to look at. And along those lines, I think it's worth considering whether that data can in some way be broken out in a manner that's consistent with how the data is reported in the use of force report. So if there's an answer now as to whether that's completely unrelated or perhaps there is some relationship, you can maybe comment on that, but if not, I'd just add that to the list of something that we'll want to discuss with the subcommittee.
We'll follow up, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
If I could just really quickly, I just wanted to reference your question regarding custody. So the custody officers were involved in 4% of our total non-categorical uses of force, and there was a 19% reduction from 2017. So we do capture information regarding the uses of force. So the number? 14%. So we had a 19% reduction in the number of custodial officers assigned to Custody Services Division.
Rate of change from the previous year on use of force? I think you said 4%.
The total for 2018 was 4%.
No, percentage. Proportionality of all these non-category use of force. Custody services represent 4%.
4% of the personnel involved. And in 2017, there were 5%.
Commissioner Decker?
And I'll just want to add something, Dr. Parnell, in terms of your training and how it has permeated through the department. Yesterday, I was invited to attend divisional training out at Mission and sat through a portion of it, and I'll say that they talked about de-escalation, trained on de-escalation using different scenarios, and then the officers presented different scenarios that they had encountered. So I wanted to let you know that, we're talking sergeants, patrol officers, it was very impressive to see that the officers were training on that level, having detailed conversations about it, and it was very heartening. So your training is certainly reaching the ranks that you intend.
Good. Do we have public comments on 2A?
Sir, we have 8 cards.
Okay.
We have Mr. Herman, Jonathan Foster, and Mary Ann.
problematic. My concern deals with Holland versus Harrington, 268F, 3D, 1179, 1192 of the 10th Circuit, 2001, explaining that officers pointing a firearm involves immediate threat of deadly force and should be predicted on at least a perceived risk of injury or danger to people in society based upon what officers know at the time. And this is because throughout the report of mental illness, which includes substance use disorders, there has been a rise of unnecessary use of deadly force, madam. So statistically, your TMU is incorrect. And the public knows that. That's why they're going to speak out regarding failure to obey issues, disregard for disorderly conduct, and the community members' fears from problematic police abuse and illegal use of force under the color of authority. So, let me not egg you on as well, but again, you must understand that such use of force against vulnerable groups of people, such as individuals like myself, who are not a threat, but reflect officers' aggressive and sometimes commission aggressive assault and attack to one's mental health, is problematic. So as I said in the past, fuck you, Steve Sobroff.
They declared war on us in the LA Times, didn't they?
Hi, I'm Jonathan Foster.
You see the article?
I was 61 straight consecutive years in the United States military. I have an MP in the family, and I grew up on Army bases. The problem is this non-categorical use of force from the audit of 2018, and this is a Supreme Court decision. This is the problem. And it sets the legal standards used to determine the lawfulness of the use of force in the First Amendment, and it's a bunch of... And it says, Graham versus the Connor, quote, the reasonableness of a particular use of force must be judged from the perspective of a reasonable officer on the scene, rather than with 20/20 vision hindsight, period. The calculus of the reasonableness must be embodied allowance for the fact that the police officers are often forced to make split-second judgments in circumstances that are tense, uncertain, rapidly evolving about the amount of force that is necessary in a particular situation, period. The test of reasonableness is not capable of precise definition or mechanical application, which is a lie. Let's see if I can get through this. It's a bunch of hard work. I know you're doing hard work. De-escalation hasn't happened in 150 years. They're finally getting to it. Okay? And this needs to be decided by the people, not the Supreme Court. And we can talk about this every day, every week, every month, and you're not. That's also the problem. Every police officer needs a drug screen because sugar is a neurotoxin. They put these rats in there, hadn't eaten sugar once in a little bowl, and the rat without sugar got right on the plant, the little thing you could get out of the water. The other rat is running around like this, doesn't know where to go. Ate sugar once. Off topic, to shoot somebody that hasn't shot at the police. You know that's off topic?
Like looking at this where the numbers are still really, really outrageous, right? I know we want to pat ourselves on the back for 4% or something ridiculous. And then when we put together Long Beach and sheriffs and LA, and are we putting all those numbers together when we compare ourselves to other major metropolitan areas? Or are we even more number one than we think? And so what I wanted to say is, like, if we're looking at de-escalation, how about if we stop throwing money at it, which is a real capital standard response that we have, throw money, more training, at things that clearly don't work. They've not worked. And so the definition of insanity, right? How about if we put the money into mental health professionals
professionals to respond to things.
That's right.
2 for 1 officer. And then stop having officers be the freaking escort for everybody.
Yep.
Somebody in my complex can't breathe and an ambulance responds and there's a freaking escort of police. That's escalating.
Yep, exactly.
That is escalating.
Exactly.
You know,
It's escalation.
Stop over-policing communities. That's escalating.
Gives them
Yep,
more budget.
exactly.
Yin yang all the time, trying to wait for them to do something wrong, is escalating.
Exactly.
Police uniforms are just inherently escalating, particularly in response to mental health folks who probably have trauma behind policing and jailing. Stop accepting the purchase or stop accepting the gift or purchase of Homeland Security.
Yep.
And creating this militarized situation that rolls into our neighborhoods. I'm white, middle class. It's not long before it's rolling into mine. I'm not stupid.
Yep.
It's just...
She sees it, we all see it.
Just leave there.
Next 3 speakers, Gina Viola, Lawrence Bazzetti, and Lauren Brock.
So, just the report alone, Mr. Soboroff, you called it a wonderful compilation of facts. I see lots of promo pictures, and I see lots of offensive things to family members who have been killed by police in this report. Also, every single one of these for 2018 was presided over by Officer Jeff Nolte, who now has a criminal past of his own. So I'm not sure how we can take anything in this report with a grain of salt, just given that fact alone. And I haven't heard you ask about that or speak to that at all in the 2 weeks that this has been on the agenda. So I'm wondering where you are with that. Albert Ramon Dorsey was naked in a shower at the gym at 24-Hour Fitness and was killed. Unarmed. He didn't have a blunt object. He didn't have anything.
Naked.
Naked in the shower.
Jeez.
That's in this report. Krishario Mack having a mental episode in the mall. That's another person that's in this report. And we had another mall shooting this year where you evacuated the Century City Mall because it's a white mall. You evacuated that mall. Officers didn't go in guns blazing like they did in the Crenshaw Mall.
Yep.
Krishario Mack was killed.
Why does that happen in black spaces?
So these things are in this report. Also, I want to go on record again about just the terminology, officer-involved shooting. It is very misleading to the public when you call it that.
Yep.
It's leading the public to believe an officer has been shot. We need to change that terminology to officer shoots civilian so that people start paying attention to what's going on in the city.
Yeah.
Followed by Lauren Brock and John Avalos.
Okay. There we go.
Thank you so much for your in-depth, detailed report. It was great. All the talk of de-escalation, it sounds incredible. Maybe it happens. I don't know. But when I look at what you spoke about, Albert Ramon Dorsey, and what happened in that 24-Hour Fitness and how no backup was called until after he was shot dead and unarmed. Right. I just want to know what's being happened in those instances. I want to know, what are we doing to fix that? I'd like to be able to review the body cam footage, but both officers removed their body cameras prior to discharging their firearms. Right. Unarmed.
So what's the point of your de-escalation strategy?
Are they fired?
I just didn't know who it was, but I've heard 3 times.
I want to know what's
Just
being
a
done.
second, I'll stop the clock for a second.
Okay.
You need to give her back time.
Just a second. So you, Madam, can speak whatever you want to speak during public comment, but what you can't do is disrupt the meeting. Please don't disrupt the meeting. If you do it again, I'm going to ask you to leave.
Your 10 seconds.
Go ahead.
Your 10 seconds.
Go ahead.
Your 10 seconds.
Mr. Bazzetti, will you stop
Robert's Rules of Order. You're out of Robert's Rules of Order.
I'm going to ask you to leave, I'm going to ask you to leave the meeting.
You can't do that right now. I'm
You're going to leave the
shutting
meeting. Go ahead.
I'd like to know what's being done in
Mr.
that case.
Pizzetti, you can leave the meeting.
Well, you declared war on us in the paper, didn't you? So we're declaring war on you.
I'd like to know what's being done in that.
You're going to jail, sober
I
off.
think we know from experience that we can't count on Jackie Lee.
That's right, sober off.
Accountable. I think oftentimes people forget that the homeless in our city are actual human beings and that many of them are suffering from serious mental illness. The mayor proposed a budget of $420 million for homeless and $348 million for street repairs. That shows what little priority the mayor has for our actual humans. Those allocating our funds are truly, and the actual priority that those allocating our funds truly serve on human life. Which then makes me question the actual values the mayor has for our officers. It shouldn't
I'm leaving, don't worry.
it shouldn't be their responsibility. It shouldn't be their
Just mind
responsibility.
your
Officers'
business,
lives.
fools.
At the end of the day, taking human life should not be something that any officer who has a desire to protect and serve should have to go home with and live on it.
You're participating in crime.
Thank you. Next speaker.
One envelope, followed by Carrie and Tina.
I'm coming every week, but I still feel so.
Make sure they get this, will you?
I'm working class.
Why don't you read this?
I'm not even middle class.
Okay? You read that.
Mr. President, if you...
Because you know what that says?
Mr.
That
Pizzetti
says,
is interrupting the meeting.
you
It's not
people.
anything as interrupted.
Well, I have your letter that says that you can commit any crime you want. And that's why you threw me out the last time, right, sober off? So I'm leaving.
President.
And you could be a bunch of fool lawbreakers all you want. It's perfectly fine by me. And here we have your participating officers in criminal activity who constantly break their oath because you are what we called you in the 60s. You got that shit? And don't you dare push me from behind again, you fucks, like you did the last time. That's elder abuse, assholes. That's why I bring my fucking camera, stupid people.